Two anglers were planning to go fishing by the lake. When they accidentally spotted a human skeleton on the ground. Looking up again, they were confronted with a mountain of human corpses. This incident attracted the attention of the higher authorities. Germany's Federal Intelligence Service held an emergency meeting and summoned senior agent Roland to the office. They planned to send him to investigate this major case that occurred in his hometown, the Oderbruch region. Roland didn't refuse his superior's order. It was a good opportunity to go back and visit his elderly father whom he hadn't seen in years. Then his superior handed over all relevant case materials to Roland. After a brief review, Roland fell silent. Because the mountain of corpses was located on the farm of his ex-wife Lena's family. Roland recalled some unpleasant events, and his attitude immediately changed. He refused to go to his hometown to investigate the case.
Sie gehen nach Krelo. Entweder mit einem Auftrag oder wir schicken Sie wegen 97 als Zeugen dorthin.
Upon hearing this name, Roland fell into memories again. It was a case he and Lena had handled when they were still in their hometown, but to this day, there were still no results. He didn't expect his superior to even bring up such an old case. It was clear that they had made up their minds to send Roland back to Oderbruch. Helpless, Roland had to take a car back to his hometown. As soon as he exited the station, Roland saw a man waiting for him. The man, named Zach, was a Polish detective, because there were Polish citizens among the mountain of corpses. Therefore, this case was a joint investigation by Germany and Poland. Zach was the Polish lead investigator. Later, on the way to the village, the two talked about the case and incidentally mentioned the 1997 case. According to Roland, a flood broke out in the river near the village at that time, causing 3 villagers to go missing. 2 weeks later, only one body of a missing person who had drowned was found. The other couple remained missing. After listening, Zach didn't ask about the details of the investigation. Instead, he brought up Roland's ex-wife Lena, not only because Lena was also in charge of the case at that time, but also because the body found was Lena's 17-year-old brother, Kai. Roland fell silent for a moment. He said that after that case, he and Lena had left the village. They divorced shortly after and had no contact since. Before they knew it, the two had arrived at the crime scene. The local police had set up a quarantine zone. The mountain of corpses was under strict guard. Researchers were identifying the deceased and trying to find connections between them, but the process was very difficult, because it contained not only human remains, but also mixed wreckage of various animals. Roland learned about the case from the local police. The 2 anglers who first discovered the remains were now under police control. But Arthur, the farmer who owned this land, wasn't cooperating. He even, along with his wife, was resisting with guns, forbidding anyone from approaching their house. This had now seriously delayed the investigation process. The police even planned to send a special operations team to break in and take the 2 into custody. Upon hearing this, Roland firmly rejected the plan. After all, if he remembered correctly, Arthur was already in his 90s. They couldn't afford to have a loss of life. Just as Roland was feeling very troubled, his ex-wife Lena was on her way. Roland suddenly had an idea. Maybe she could persuade Arthur to cooperate with the investigation. Before that, Roland wanted to learn some other clues first, so he found pathologist Sieg, because the battle that took place in Oderbruch in April 1945 caused nearly 100,000 German Wehrmacht soldiers to die on this land. Newly discovered remains were found every year, and Sieg was in charge of recovering the soldiers' remains. Sieg firmly ruled out the possibility that those were the remains of soldiers. He then revealed that the remains might be related to Arthur's neighbor Paul, because he was a lunatic who was obsessed with collecting war supplies, weapons, and explosives. Roland didn't respond to this. Instead, he interrogated the 2 anglers again, but they knew nothing. At this point, a commotion suddenly broke out outside. It was his ex-wife Lena who came back, but she refused to communicate with her father. This made the local police very embarrassed, and they had no choice but to continue preparing to send special police to rush in and subdue Arthur according to the original plan. After Roland learned about this, he hurried to find the relevant person in charge, saying that he wanted to try to persuade Lena, and only take action if he failed. In this way, after many years, Roland sought his ex-wife Lena again. Roland said anxiously that if her father had an accident, the truth about Kai would be buried forever. Lena hesitated for a long time, and finally decided to help Roland. Not long after, Lena successfully persuaded her parents. The Arthur couple were immediately taken to the interrogation room. The police took the opportunity to conduct a thorough search of the house, but found no abnormal traces or suspicious persons, and the elderly couple knew nothing either. It seemed that the case really had nothing to do with them. In the end, the police had no choice but to temporarily release the 2, but they needed to be monitored 24 hours a day. Helplessly, Roland thought of Lena again. Only she could persuade Arthur, But Arthur was already displeased with his daughter. Seeing her helping the police interrogate him, Arthur suddenly flew into a rage and became more resistant. But Lena knew exactly where his weakness was. After Arthur was silent for a moment, he finally said he was willing to tell everything he knew, but the condition was that after the matter was over, Lena must leave immediately and never come back. After getting his daughter's promise, Arthur finally told what he knew. That night, the couple went to bed early and didn't hear any movement, and this piece of land had been abandoned for a long time, so it couldn't be ruled out that someone was engaged in illegal activities here. Roland then asked about the 1997 case. Although Arthur answered, he provided no useful information, which was exactly the same as the conclusion in the report at that time. But at the end of the conversation, Arthur suddenly said that the reason his son drowned was actually due to his daughter's negligence, because since then, she has been taking illicit drugs, which was why she resigned from the police station. As for the missing couple, Arthur said he didn't know. Zach then asked about an unsolved case from 50 years ago. At that time, the area around the village was also hit by floods. 2 villagers' bodies were washed ashore. The forensic examination concluded that they died of drowning. Later, during the investigation, the police identified 2 suspects. One of them was Arthur. Zach wanted to know information about the other suspect, but Arthur didn't answer directly. Roland and Zach were convinced that the old man must be hiding something. It's just that there was no evidence for the time being, so they couldn't do anything to Arthur. In this way, Arthur was able to go home temporarily. Lena hurried forward to help, but was rejected by her father. Perhaps he was still angry about her betrayal, but at this point, Lena noticed a familiar figure in the room where her brother once lived. But in the blink of an eye, the figure disappeared again. Before Lena could figure out what was going on, her father asked her to keep her promise and leave the town forever. Lena could only leave home in silence. At the same time, the police made a major breakthrough. In the investigation of the mountain of corpses, they confirmed that one of the bodies was one of the 2 missing persons in case 97. Roland found Lena and informed her of this discovery, but Lena was about to leave the town at this time, and could no longer accompany Roland in the investigation. Not long after, Lena arrived at the railway station. Looking at the scene in front of her, she recalled memories of getting along with her brother. At that time, Kai told Lena at the station that he wanted to leave here. Lena tried her best to persuade her brother to stay, and promised to protect him. Obviously, she didn't do anything. When Lena boarded the train, she seemed to see a figure resembling her brother, quietly looking at her outside the window. Lena's heart tightened as if she thought of something. She quickly pulled the train's emergency brake valve, and decided not to leave. On the other side, with in-depth investigation, more shocking clues emerged. The time span of hundreds of human remains was as long as 50 years. All the deceased were violently attacked during their lifetime. This horrific serial murder case quickly attracted widespread attention from Polish and German media. Under huge public opinion pressure, the police said that they would solve the case as soon as possible. They revealed to the media that the case may be related to an evil cult organization, but due to the lack of key clues, the modus operandi and motive are still a mystery. During the autopsy of the bodies, forensic doctors found that all victims had their blood drawn. Some were even almost completely drained. They don't know why for the time being. While the relevant staff were cleaning up the mountain of corpses, a body that was originally thought to be dead suddenly came to life, and was urgently sent to a local hospital for rescue. After diagnosis by doctors, it was confirmed that the injured man was only recently thrown there. Therefore, the man became the key to solving the bizarre case. After unremitting efforts of rescue by the hospital, the man finally woke up. Because his left face was severely torn, he couldn't speak at all. Zach handed him a pen and a piece of white paper, hoping he could write down some clues about the case. The man tremblingly drew a mysterious symbol on the paper. He then fell into a coma again. No one understood what the symbol meant. They could only wait for the man to wake up again, to reveal the truth to them. Meanwhile, Lena returned to the village, suspecting that her brother was still alive, but she was stopped by the police and questioned in detail. They found out that a shooting incident had occurred in the village in 1990, and the criminal was Lena. She explained that during a play with a gun, it accidentally went off and hit her father Arthur. The police again asked where Lena, who was a child at that time, had obtained the gun. Lena claimed she had taken it from her neighbor Paul's house. He had collected many items from the war period. Therefore, several children including Lena used that place as a testing ground. The test was for each person to steal an item from Paul's house. What Lena took was that handgun. Having received a satisfactory answer, the police stopped asking more questions. But when she walked out of the temporary camp, the memories that emerged in her mind were completely different from what she had said earlier. That year, her father Arthur pinned her blood-covered brother to the ground and raised the knife in his hand, ready to kill Kai. Luckily, Lena pulled the trigger in time to save her brother's life. Lena deliberately concealed this truth for some unknown reason. Roland's voice suddenly pulled Lena back to the present. He was parking his car next to Lena. Learning that Lena was going to find a hotel to stay in, Roland offered to give her a ride. On the way to the hotel, Lena mentioned her brother Kai's autopsy report, only to be told that the report from that year had been lost. This made Lena more suspicious that there was something fishy about her brother's death. Therefore, Lena hoped that Roland could go back and find out from his father about the circumstances of the loss, because Roland's father, Joss, had been the town's only police officer for many years. He might know something. Although Roland felt that his ex-wife was being a bit paranoid, he still agreed. Soon after, the two arrived at a local hotel. Just as Lena got out of the car, she once again saw a figure in the distance that looked very similar to her brother. It also disappeared in the blink of an eye. Lena was somewhat unsure whether it was an illusion, or if her brother was really still alive. On the other side, after Roland returned to his residence, he saw his father Joss watching the news on TV intently. A strange expression appeared on his face. Thinking that his father was very interested in the case, Roland took the initiative to mention some details, including the discovery of one of the two people who had been missing. But his father didn't seem to care much. The next day, Lena went to Roland's house to ask about her brother's autopsy report, but Joss seemed very unwilling to see Lena. He not only refused to open the door for her, but even silently drew the curtains, as if he was avoiding something. Helpless, Lena went to find Sieg, the forensic doctor, who had performed the autopsy on her brother back then. At this point, he was chairing a meeting. Lena accidentally caught a glimpse of one of the participants, with a face full of scars on his left cheek. When that person saw Lena, he immediately got up and left in a hurry. Such a strange reaction naturally attracted Lena's attention, but she couldn't recall when she had come into contact with that person. After finally waiting for the meeting to end, Lena found Sieg and asked for a copy of her brother's autopsy report, but Sieg told her that he only kept copies for 10 years. By now, it had long been destroyed. As for the original, it was in the hands of the police. Moreover, Lena had seen her brother's body with her own eyes. Forensic Dr. Sieg thought there was no need for doubt, but Lena vaguely remembered that she had been held back by Joss that day, and had no chance to get close to the body at all. Therefore, she couldn't be sure if the body was her brother. Moreover, at that time, her father had been exchanging glances with a certain police officer. It seemed to be the scar-faced man she had just seen. Thinking of this, Lena became more convinced that there was an ulterior secret behind her brother's death, and it was most likely related to their father's generation. On the other side, Zach and Roland went to investigate the suspect Paul's place. Because of the war relics he had collected, the place looked like a garbage dump. No sooner had the two walked into the backyard and started their investigation than an accident suddenly happened. Then they noticed two figures quickly fleeing into the woods behind the house. Zach hurriedly fired a warning shot, and the two finally stopped. Then Roland realized they were the two anglers from before. The two explained that Paul's collection contained many flammable and explosive items. The explosion was just an accident. Zach and Roland naturally didn't believe it. They immediately cuffed the two anglers in the car. Then they returned to Paul's house to investigate again, because they noticed that even after such an explosion, Paul never showed up. There must be something wrong inside. Out of caution, they even requested backup. Zach found a severed human finger in some grass. Meanwhile, Roland found some rabbit carcasses still dripping with blood. Shortly after, Paul suddenly appeared behind him with a gun. His eyes were filled with hostility. When he learned that Roland was Joss' child, the hostility in his eyes grew stronger. Roland managed to persuade him to put down his weapon. He learned that Paul was being so cautious because Joss had tried to hint something to him before. This answer left Roland a bit confused. But before he could figure out what was going on, Zach arrived with backup. Paul was immediately arrested by the police as a suspect. This scene was completely seen by Lena. She recalled something again. At that time, their leader was the young Roland. Her brother Kai also wanted to join the small group. Roland set a test for him to sneak into Paul's yard and get a steel helmet. Kai crawled in through the dog hole. Just as he was about to get the steel helmet, the ground suddenly opened up. A man with a gun and a mask suddenly appeared in front of them. Roland and another member, Ader, were so scared that they turned and ran immediately. Kai was also in a panic, even forgetting to run. In the end, it was Lena who stood in front of her brother. At this point, the man suddenly took off his mask. It was Paul. Although he praised Lena's courage, he also made her remember the powerlessness of having one's life in the hands of others. Then Paul gave the pistol to Lena as a reward for her. It was the same one that later injured her father Arthur. Lena remembered that she had hidden the pistol in her brother's secret base back then. It was a cave in the forest. He even kept some leeches there as pets. Lena hid the gun in a lunchbox, and then buried it in the soil. Now, Lena returned to that cave again. There were biological remains everywhere. The glass jar used to keep leeches was also abandoned, but that old-fashioned pistol was still hidden here. Later, Lena found her childhood friend. It's just that due to some accident, Ader had to sit in a wheelchair. While the two were talking, Roland happened to arrive. He took out the mysterious symbol drawn by the survivor, trying to get some useful clues, but unluckily, the old friends had never seen this symbol before. But Lena told them about Joss' abnormal behavior in Sing's situation. She believed that these fathers were likely hiding a major secret. After hearing this, Roland's expression also became serious. But bad things happened one after another. That night, the survivor died due to worsening injuries. His identity remained unknown. In addition, because a severed finger was found in Paul's yard, the police believed that he was involved in the murder case of the Mountain of Corpses. Paul's mental state was very unstable, and it was impossible for him to do it alone. The police confirmed that there must be other accomplices. At the same time, Lena, in order to find out if her brother was really dead, dug up her brother's grave overnight, collected samples from the remains, and then disguised herself as a staff member to come to the scene of the Mountain of Corpses. The police were conducting DNA matching. If Kai's DNA could match the remains, it meant that those were just her illusions. The next second, a large number of people suddenly poured into the adjacent tent. It seemed that a special situation had occurred. Lena put on a mask and quietly followed. She saw that there was an iron door leading to the underground, on the ground of the cleaned-up Mountain of Corpses. After the police walked in, they found a room with white bone remains all over the ground. It was impossible to tell whether they were human or animal. What's even more strange was that there was a glass jar in the center of the room. Inside, there was a living leech. No one was more shocked than Lena when seeing this scene, because only her brother liked to keep leeches like this. Lena's gaff was enticed by Roland. Lena found that she might be exposed, and quickly escaped from the police isolation zone. But Roland didn't report it. Instead, he checked the person's identity through surveillance. So he found that Lena put a can of something into the DNA sample to be tested. He sent a message to question Lena about what she was doing exactly. Lena had no choice but to tell the truth. She suspected that her brother's autopsy report was hidden by Roland's father. The body seen in the mortuary was also faked by those fathers. Those who faked her brother's death back then must be hiding an ulterior secret. After returning to the hotel, Lena recalled some details from the past. Many years ago, 4 people including Roland made an appointment to explore the forest. Passing by the location of the Mountain of Corpses, they found the remains of a soldier in the forest. The bold Ader stepped forward to check, and found an old grenade from it. At this point, Ader suddenly shouted loudly, scaring Kai into throwing the grenade on the ground. Ader mocked everyone for being cowardly, making Roland and others so angry that they turned around and left. But the next second, the grenade actually exploded. Ader was blown to the ground on the spot. Lena and Roland immediately carried the injured companion to seek help at home, completely forgetting about their younger brother Kai. It wasn't until later, after her father Arthur had treated Ader's wounds, that Lena remembered her brother. She hurried back to look for him, only to find her brother crawling on the ground, greedily licking the blood in the soil. Lena immediately froze in place. At this point, Father Arthur also hurried to the scene. Seeing his son's mouth covered in blood, he seemed to understand something. Then he roughly pushed his daughter away, knocked Kai to the ground with a punch, dragged him home, and prepared to kill Kai with a knife. Lena shot her father to save her brother. The police came to Lena's father's house again, to ask about the basement under the Mountain of Corpses. The old man claimed that it was just an abandoned potato cellar. As for the leeches inside, he had no idea where they came from. Obviously, no useful clues could be obtained from Arthur, and Roland learned from his colleagues that, among these test subjects, only one girl who went missing 8 years ago was identified. There were no other matching results. This meant that the body in the cemetery wasn't Kai's. Roland immediately told Lena. The other person seemed very excited after hearing this. Her younger brother Kai must still be alive. Lena immediately drove with Roland to Joss' residence to ask him about the truth. Back then, Roland emotionally questioned his father. When Joss saw that the matter was exposed, he took a cardboard box from the basement, saying that it contained the truth from that year, and warned the two that they must not reveal it, otherwise it would definitely bring death upon them. After leaving Joss' place, Lena and Roland hesitated for a moment before starting to check. Inside were all the records of the 1997 case, and Kai's autopsy report. At the bottom of the cardboard box, there was also an old videotape. The two went to Ader's house to borrow his video recorder to watch it. Then the screen showed the scene of Joss interrogating Paul. Back then, he claimed to have seen Kai alive, believing that someone had deliberately faked his death. But in the subsequent conversation, Paul found that Joss was also involved. His emotions suddenly became agitated, and he kept shouting. He looked as if he was crazy. Joss immediately sent someone to take him away, and silently turned off the camera. Obviously, this was why Paul thought Joss would kill him. But this still didn't explain the doubt in Roland's mind. Why did they fake Kai's death? And in Lena's heart, there was already a vague answer. Many years ago, after rescuing her brother from her father, she once pointed a gun at her parents, demanding that they take her brother to the hospital for an examination. Under Lena's threat, her brother was sent to the hospital the next day. During this period, Lena noticed that her brother seemed to have an irresistible craving for blood, but the doctor said Kai was perfectly healthy. Lena vaguely remembered that, when her father shook hands with the doctor, there was a slight subtle change in their eyes. Since then, her father's gaze towards Kai had been very complicated. Now, Lena found her mother, wanting to know where they had hidden her brother. Her mother tremblingly named a location in Poland. Lena didn't understand Polish, so she found Ader and begged his Polish-speaking brother Ajer to accompany her to Poland. Ader didn't refuse. Thus, accompanied by Ajer, Lena went to Poland and found the address her mother had mentioned, but as soon as Lena walked in, she found a pool of blood on the ground. It seemed that a fierce battle had taken place. Lena immediately became alert, pulled out her pistol, and carefully continued searching the house. Suddenly, she found a pallet under the bed. Her brother liked to hide under the bed to sleep. When he was a child, Lena suspected that this was where Kai rested. As she leaned down to check, she narrowly avoided a bullet. Ajer, who was waiting outside, immediately hid behind the car to find the killer's position. After hearing the gunshot, he spotted a man wearing a hat not far away, charging towards them with a gun. Seeing the danger, Ajer immediately turned and ran. When Lena came out of the house, the man with the hat immediately attacked her. The fallen Lena turned her head with difficulty and saw that the other person was missing 2 fingers. At this point, another man wearing a hat appeared, and quickly knocked the gunman to the ground. Then he picked up Lena and ran away from the scene, running for what seemed like ages. He finally put the injured Lena down in a forest. The man was about to leave, but was stopped by Lena with a pistol. It turned out that the man was her younger brother Kai, with almost no change in his appearance. After many years, the siblings finally met again. Under Lena's constant questioning, Kai told many things. It all started back in 1990. Even then, he had already shown an abnormal craving for blood. His father was thus full of hostility towards Kai. Under the protection of his mother, Kai went to Poland and temporarily lived at his cousin John's house. John, who was also a child at the time, shared his secret base in the forest with Kai, and this became the root of all subsequent troubles. During his stay at John's house, his mother tried to make Kai overcome his instinct for blood. Only after confirming that Kai was alright, did she decide to take him back to their hometown. At that time, Kai still didn't know what it really meant. He sadly parted with John. The two exchanged gifts with each other. John gave him a wooden crocodile model. After that, Kai returned to Germany with his mother. His mother thought her son's condition had returned to normal, but his father never let go of his doubts. While Lena was fast asleep, he quietly placed a cup of blood in front of Kai to test him, but he would never have thought. After his father left, Kai quietly climbed out through the window. Early the next morning, his father told Lena to go out first. Then he checked the cup carefully, and found that the amount of blood hadn't decreased. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. It's just that Arthur didn't notice that Kai's hands behind his back were covered in mud. A sudden bad news came a few days later. A nearby dam was destroyed by the flood. All villagers needed to go to the river to take part in flood prevention work. Kai curiously asked about the reason for the dam's collapse. His father took him outside and dug a pit in the soil, using the flow of water as an example, to demonstrate the function of the dam. But Arthur found an animal skull in the soil. He looked at his son with suspicion, although Kai hurriedly explained that he had buried the skull a long time ago. It still aroused Arthur's suspicion.
Gut, Kai. Ich will dir glauben.
At that very point, Lena saw a mysterious masked man standing not far away. Her father's face suddenly changed. He rushed into the house immediately, and took out a shotgun to aim at the man. The man, perhaps sensing danger, turned around and left. That evening, after school, Kai was bullied by school tyrants. He was stripped down to only a pair of shorts. The leech he kept in the glass jar was also killed by them. Kai angrily chased after them to take revenge. But he was no match at all. Instead, he was pushed onto the barbed wire by the roadside. Multiple places on his body were cut, and blood kept flowing. When Lena arrived, her blood-covered younger brother had already knocked the school tyrant to the ground. He even disfigured half of his face. Seeing this bloody scene, Lena fainted on the spot. Considering that both parties were minors, this matter was suppressed by Roland's father, Jos, but it was required that Kai must not approach the other person again from then on. And on the night of the incident, Kai climbed out of the window again, and went all the way to the forest. It turned out that he had set some hunting traps. In the secret base, he killed the small animals he caught, and drained their blood to satisfy his craving for blood. But this time, just as he was about to drink the blood, the masked man suddenly appeared. He claimed to know everything that Kai was going through, and said that Kai became like this all because he inherited his father's bloodline. The masked man described Kai's father as a wolf, but betrayed the family for his mother, who was like a sheep, leaving Kai to secretly drink animal blood that was almost useless. The masked man also said that Kai would one day crave human blood, because only this kind of blood could arouse the true power in his body, and once Arthur sensed that his craving for blood still hadn't diminished, he would definitely kill him without mercy. After saying that, the masked man turned around and left. In fact, it was exactly as that man had said. A few months later, Ader's leg was blown off beside the soldier's remains, and blood filled the pit. Driven by an irresistible temptation, Kai swallowed human blood for the first time, but was seen by his sister and father. Arthur was immediately furious, and wanted to get rid of Kai with his own hands. Finally, it was thanks to Lena's shooting that she saved him. This time, it was still Roland's father, Jos, who suppressed everything. In the following years, his sister always protected him, but his father never said a word to him again. He had to secretly drink animal blood to relieve his inner hunger and thirst for blood, until one night, the mysterious masked man appeared again. But this time, there was another person beside the masked man, who seemed to be his father. He was wrapped more tightly, making it impossible to see his face at all. The mysterious man told Kai that people like them have a rare gene, and it's passed down only from males, not to females. In order for Kai to continue the family bloodline, the two would teach him the ways to survive. Then they took Kai to that cellar, claiming that this was once a place where he and Arthur stored food. It was rarely used now. Kai was very scared and turned to run away immediately, but Kai was caught up in an instant. Luckily, the man didn't want to hurt him. He handed Kai a book, saying that it contained the rules of survival. Then he gave Kai the key to the cellar, saying that he could discard the bodies in the cellar. When the time came, 1997, although Kai got the key to the cellar, he had never killed anyone. After years of suffering, he planned to tell his sister the truth. At this time, Kai learned from Roland that the two were about to move to Berlin for work. This was undoubtedly a great blow to Kai. A few days before Lena was about to leave, the river near the town flooded again and burst its banks. Villagers rushed to the river to build flood walls with sandbags. Kai wanted to beg his sister Lena to stay, but learned that she was already pregnant with Roland's child, and had to leave here. Stimulated by Lena, Kai's inner desire for blood swelled rapidly. He hurried back to the woods, trying to find small animals to ease his craving, but the hunting cage was empty. Kai, overcome with hunger and thirst, turned his gaze to his favorite puppy. By the time Lena came to look for Kai, he had already killed the puppy. Lena couldn't accept that her brother had become like this, and immediately rushed up to shake Kai frantically, but Kai exerted great strength with just a casual push. Even Kai was shocked by the scene in front of him. He recalled the words of those masked men. Only then did he realize that he might no longer be an ordinary person. Not knowing how to face his sister, he could only choose to flee in a hurry. Later, he came to a house flooded by the flood. It happened that the Seidel couple were moving important items from the house to the car. Kai quickly wiped the blood from his mouth. To avoid scaring the elderly couple, the couple thought Kai was also a refugee. They told him that as long as he helped carry some items, they would take him away in their car. It was this act that completely led Kai down a path of no return. While helping the elderly, he accidentally dropped the photo album into the water. The old man hurried to retrieve it, which once again aroused Kai's bloodthirsty desire, so he cruelly drowned the old man in the water. A few minutes later, Kai walked out of the hut alone with blood on his mouth. The old woman in the car was shocked, but it was too late. She was also cruelly killed by Kai shortly after. He put both bodies in the car, and then drove away from his hometown. Over the past 20 years, he followed the survival rules in the book, hunting around and taking countless lives. He extracted blood in John's forest cabin. The bodies were all stuffed into his father's abandoned cellar, until a few months ago, John's wife accidentally mentioned that there were strangers lingering near the forest cabin. She was worried that drug addicts would gather there to take drugs. If something happened, it might implicate John. That's why John came to the cabin again, and completely sealed its doors and windows. Thus, he discovered Kai's arrangements in the wooden crocodile sculpture he had given to Kai back then. At this point, Kai also happened to return to the cabin to rest. More than 20 years had passed. Kai was still as young as ever, while John had become a middle-aged man, so he didn't recognize Kai's true identity, and mistook him for Kai's son. In this way, Kai was taken to John's home to live, under the care of the couple. Kai spent a peaceful and beautiful time, and decided to make a clean break with the past, so he threw the key to the cellar into the lake. But what he didn't expect was that the job John helped him find was in a slaughterhouse. Kai's bloodthirsty desire became increasingly uncontrollable, so every noon, after other workers left, he would fill a bottle with animal blood. But such a life made it even harder for Kai to control his bloodthirsty desire. A few days later, John's wife accidentally cut her hand while chopping vegetables. The moment blood flowed out, it immediately triggered Kai's suppressed desire. When John returned home, his wife had disappeared. Only Kai was sitting alone at the dining table. Out of guilt, Kai told his cousin John the truth. After hearing this, John immediately realized something was wrong, and eagerly asked where his wife was. Kai didn't answer. John immediately started searching around the room like a madman. Finally, he saw his wife, who had long lost her life. In the kitchen, John held his wife's body and cried bitterly. When he came back again, he was holding a shotgun in his hand. Kai cried and apologized to John. Obviously, he didn't want it to happen that way. John stared at Kai for a long time, and finally didn't shoot him. Instead, he chose to follow his wife. The tragic death of John's family dealt a heavy blow to Kai, and he decided to make the existence of their clan known to the public, to prevent more people from encountering such tragedies in the future. So Kai came to the cellar. Again, split the lock, and carried out all the bodies inside, piling them up into a mountain of corpses. The body of John, with half of his face blown off, was among them, but Kai didn't expect that even though half of his face was blown off, John didn't die, and provided the mysterious symbol to the police a few days later. Now, after listening to her brother's experiences over the years, Lena was filled with emotions. Even though he had many faults, Lena still decided to protect her brother. On the other side, in a free high school that specifically enrolled German and Polish orphans, the school's rules were very strange. It required all students to have their blood drawn once a month, and there were special personnel to store their blood bags. A few weeks after the girl Annie came to this school, her roommate suddenly disappeared. The school only said that the other person had transferred and left, but Annie learned from a letter hidden by her roommate that she didn't leave voluntarily. The roommate had long noticed that something was wrong with the school. Then she had a premonition that she was in danger, and she suddenly disappeared shortly after writing this letter. Since that day, Annie had been asking around the school for her roommate's whereabouts, but she happened to overhear their conspiracy. The vice principal walked into the principal's office with a man in black. They seemed to be talking about a certain student who seemed to have discovered some secrets of the school. The principal wanted the man in black to get rid of the trouble. Otherwise, once the school's secrets were exposed, his efforts of more than 10 years would be destroyed in one fell swoop. At this point, Annie accidentally knocked down some dust, which was enticed by the man in black below. The other person immediately chased over to check, but luckily, Annie escaped quickly and managed to escape unharmed. On the other side, after Lena learned the whole story, to verify what her brother said, she deliberately cut her palm and dripped blood into a glass. Kai's eyes instantly became fanatical and unfamiliar. He struggled to restrain his inner bloodthirsty desire, and explained the possible consequences of drinking blood, hoping his sister would give up. Lena didn't believe her brother would hurt her because of this, so she insisted on letting him drink the blood. In the end, Kai, struggling to contain his desire, smashed the glass against the wall. Lena fell into silence for a long time. Her brother's behavior just now, coupled with his face that hadn't aged in 20 years, proved that he was indeed no longer an ordinary person. Lena decided to help her brother find a way to get rid of the curse, but taking Kai back rashly would only cause panic among people, so she had to let him stay in the wooden house.
Weil ich die Regeln gebrochen habe, wollen die mich tot sehen. Und dich jetzt auch. Und die werden es wieder versuchen.
But for the sake of her brother, Lena didn't seem to care about this. Later, when Lena returned to John's residence, she didn't find the man in black or Adger, so she drove back to Germany alone. During this time, Lena called Roland and told him not to expose the items in the box. When Lena returned to the village, she found that a large number of residents were being gathered by the police. Later, she learned that the police were holding a village meeting, appealing to those with information to provide clues about the Mountain of Corpses incident. Lena knew well that the matter was complicated. She couldn't help but suspect that the mysterious man in black was now hiding among the residents. After talking with Roland, she learned that the police had identified Lena's father as the prime suspect. Lena couldn't believe that her father was the mastermind, but Kai's situation was too bizarre, and Lena couldn't tell Roland about it, so she had to leave in a hurry and search for suspicious clues in the town alone. Then Lena noticed a garbage truck parked by the roadside. The driver was the school tyrant who had bullied her brother. He seemed to be monitoring her, so Lena suspected that the school tyrant was also involved, and planned to investigate further. But before that, she needed to contact Ader to find out about the missing Adger. But Adger's phone was always unanswered. Ader also didn't know where his brother had gone. Lena began to worry about Adger's safety. At this point, Lena accidentally found that forensic Dr. Sieg was staring at her, and he fled immediately after being spotted. Lena chased after him to ask.
Eine Stimme am Telefon. Die haben gesagt, wenn ich das Geld nicht nehme, dann bin ich tot.
While the two were talking, Roland happened to walk in. Sieg hurriedly said that if they wanted to know the identity of the mastermind, they should ask Roland's father, Joss. Lena hurriedly drove to Roland's father's house, only to find that he was already dead. This sudden change left Lena and the other in a state of confusion and suspicion. Was the mastermind monitoring them all along on the other side, after his sister left? Kai failed to restrain his inner bloodthirsty desire. He picked up the glass shard stained with his sister's blood, chewed it, and swallowed it. Stimulated by the blood, Kai's bloodthirsty desire erupted completely. He rushed into the forest, searching for any animal that could ease his craving, but he didn't find a single prey. Just as Kai was about to go crazy, due to his bloodthirsty desire, he happened to see a backpacker walking into the cabin not far away. Kai immediately followed. The man skillfully opened the cabin door. When the backpacker saw Kai chasing into the room, he was taken aback for a moment, then took out a syringe and invited Kai to enjoy it together. It turned out that the other person was a drug addict. Luckily, in the end, Kai held back his desire, and forcibly drove away the drug addict Philip, saying that if he appeared here again, he would kill him with his own hands. After the other person left, Kai gradually calmed down his inner craving for blood, but such patience wasn't a solution after all. The news of his father's death made Roland very sad. He couldn't help but talk about things from his childhood. Lena then learned that back then, whenever someone came to see Joss at home, Roland would be taken by his mother to hide in the basement, until that day in 1997, when Roland hid in the basement again. He accidentally saw a mysterious masked man among the visitors. He handed Joss a sum of money. Looking back now, it was probably related to Kai's matter. Hearing this news, Lena immediately rushed to her father's house, and said that she had found her brother. She hoped that her father could tell her what kind of incident Kai was involved in, that made her continuously targeted for assassination. Even Joss died because of it not long ago. Seeing that Lena had already investigated so much, Arthur also became restless. Arthur, who originally had to walk with a cane, suddenly rushed to Lena with quick steps. He lifted her up with one hand, and pressed her against the wall, showing no signs of being a 90-year-old man. His mother hurried forward to persuade him, and only then did Arthur let go.
Bitte hör auf mit deinen Fragen. Die Antworten werden dich dein Leben kosten.
With that said, Arthur returned to his room. Lena looked at the glass he had been drinking from just now. To her shock, she found that it wasn't red wine inside, but warm blood. Then Lena walked out of the house. She saw a bright red bloodstain on the family's sheep. Only then did Lena believe that her brother was telling the truth. They were indeed not ordinary humans. At the same time, Polish detective Zach made a new discovery. Ever since John died in the hospital, he had been thinking in his office about what the mysterious symbol meant. In a moment of inspiration, Zach seemed to realize something. He drew the symbol on a piece of transparent plastic paper in order. After repeatedly splitting, he formed 3 letters, which was Kai's name. Zach suddenly realized something. On the other side, after leaving home, Lena returned to her brother's place again, only to find his body covered in leeches. Lena carefully scraped off the leeches one by one with a knife, and collected them back into a glass bottle. At this point, something magical happened. The wounds left by the leeches had already disappeared. Kai explained that, as long as he drank human blood, his wounds would heal quickly. Lena was already accustomed to such bizarre things by now. Then she took out a gun and said her real purpose. Lena wanted to expose Kai's race to the public, and the gun was her final option for her brother. If Kai was unwilling, she asked him to kill her right now. Naturally, Kai wouldn't hurt his sister, so he had to cooperate with her plan. Then Kai told his sister everything he knew. According to what was written in the survival manual, the man in black and his father came to Oderbruch by sea in 1947. Lena calculated that her father was about 22 years old at that time, but there was no record of Arthur in the book. Now Lena had 2 investigation directions. First was the school tyrant, whose suspicious behavior at that time showed that he obviously knew something. The second was Adger. Besides her parents, only Adger and his brother knew about Lena going to John's house. Lena remembered that Adger had suddenly contacted someone on the way there, so Lena suspected that Adger had brought the man in black. In the end, she chose to investigate Adger first. Later, Lena came to a hidden cabin of Adger's in the suburbs. Although she didn't see the other person, she found a file bag. It contained many photos of young people and some blood samples, which corresponded exactly to the people in the photos. Thinking of their bloodthirsty nature, Lena became more certain that Adger had brought the man in black. At this point, Lena remembered she had seen one of the girls in the photos on her way back from Poland, so she set off for Poland again, and the person Lena was looking for was the student Annie. But Annie was very wary of Lena. Lena could only tell part of the truth, especially the part about Annie's photo. This really worked. But before Annie could say anything, the school's vice principal arrived and forced Lena out. and Annie watched Lena leave, wondering what she was thinking. That night, Annie took out the letter left by her missing roommate again, and secretly read it under the covers. The letter mentioned that 2 people often came to the school, one of them had only 3 fingers, the other was called the boss. The principal showed great respect and even fear towards him. The missing roommate wrote at the end, she believed that there was an ulterior conspiracy behind the school. She planned to escape that night but was worried about failure, so she left the letter. Now Annie also thought there was something wrong with the school. She told her judgment to her friend, and wanted to invite her to escape here together. But the other person was reluctant to leave the school life. After all, they were all homeless orphans. Her friend not only refused to leave, but also didn't want Annie to disrupt everyone's life, so she burned the letter. Luckily, Annie had taken photos of the letter's content in advance. Having failed to convince her friend, Annie didn't act rashly. Instead, she carefully observed the changes in the school. It wasn't long before Annie noticed that more strangers had come to the school. They were a pair of very elderly people, Lena's parents. Annie quietly followed behind, eavesdropping on the conversation between Arthur and the others. Then Annie heard a mysterious voice, sternly ordering the old woman to leave, claiming that he didn't want to associate with sheep. But Arthur didn't let his wife leave and instead explained their purpose. The 2 begged the other person to spare their daughter, but the man still insisted that he would only continue the conversation if the old woman left. Helpless, Arthur had to ask his wife to go out and wait first. Then the voice continued to speak. He claimed that it was all Arthur's son's fault, that the whole family was implicated because of it. Therefore, he demanded that Arthur must hand over his son. At that time, he would naturally no longer hold his daughter accountable, but from then on, Arthur would never be allowed to set foot here again. Annie hadn't finished listening to the conversation, because at this point, a mysterious man in black knocked Annie unconscious from behind, and locked her in a cell. On the other side, Lena still didn't know that her father had pleaded with the mastermind for her. She had planned to join forces with Roland to expose the existence of the blood-sucking monsters, only to be told that he was leaving. Because Roland was deeply affected by his father's death, his superiors thought that Roland was no longer in a state suitable for continuing the investigation, so they decided to transfer him back to the Berlin headquarters. Roland believed that all this was because Lena, who clearly knew a lot of information, was always unwilling to share it. He no longer intended to help Lena, and even decided to destroy the relevant records. Roland became more and more excited as he spoke, and then even mentioned their child. Then he turned and left without waiting for Lena's explanation. Lena chased after him to apologize, and after some honest communication, Roland finally calmed down a little. Lena then asked about the events of 1947, that is, the incident of the man in black arriving in the town, mentioned in the survival guide. But Roland also didn't know, but he knew there was a place where they could find relevant clues. Led by Roland, the 2 came to a mansion. This was the residence of the local tycoon Jason. The other person was nearly 100 years old, and might know relevant information. But when the butler led the 2 to Jason, they couldn't help but be stunned, because old Jason's current condition was very bad. His whole body was sustained by machines, and he could barely communicate normally. The butler only gave them 5 minutes, so the 2 immediately asked about things from 70 years ago. Old Jason mustered up his strength and began to speak. According to old Jason, shortly after the end of World War II, 2 Romanians suddenly came to the town. They occupied an abandoned farm and changed their names. One of them impersonated a deserter from the village. The other left the village shortly after and disappeared completely. The one who impersonated the deserter was none other than Arthur. At this point, the old man began to gasp for breath and cough uncontrollably. It was clear that he could no longer continue the conversation. The butler drove Roland and the other away. Before leaving, Lena asked old Jason about the appearance of the Romanian who had left, but she was told that the man always kept his hat brim low, making it impossible to see his face clearly. Although the 2 gained a lot of information, they still couldn't figure out the specific identity of the man in black. On the other side, Kai returned to the cabin with a freshly caught rabbit, ready to have a hearty meal, only to find the cabin brightly lit. Kai cautiously entered and saw the drug addict Philip again. Thus, the drug addict Philip replaced the rabbit as Kai's meal. Lena went to the school tyrant's house to ask about the truth from that year. The school tyrant was nervous when he saw Lena, showed resistance, and called many people to forcefully drive Lena away. Having failed to get information from the school tyrant, Lena wasn't discouraged. Instead, she called her brother Kai in the forest, preparing to go to Nigeria to find the truth. She didn't notice Philip's body in the cabin, to prevent her brother from getting into more trouble. Before leaving, Lena went to the slaughterhouse to buy a large bucket of animal blood to ease Kai's bloodthirsty desire. But what Lena didn't expect was, not long after, Roland followed her route to that cabin. It turned out that Roland had taken the opportunity to install a positioning system in Lena's car. Since Lena wouldn't tell him the information, Roland decided to investigate in person. Thus, Roland discovered Philip's body. At this point, voices of conversation came from outside the cabin. Roland's heart tightened, thinking that the murderer had returned. He immediately pulled out his pistol, ready to fight the murderer, but after cautiously observing, Roland found that there were only two ordinary people. After talking, he learned that they were search volunteers. They had previously discovered a boy's body in the cabin, and had gone to report it to the police. Now they returned here only to guard the scene, and wait for the police to arrive. Not long after, the police arrived, and it was their old acquaintance, Polish detective Zach. The other person was also very shocked to see Roland, because the order to transfer Roland back was conveyed with Zach's help. But now was clearly not the time to care about such things. The two worked together to conduct a simple investigation of the cabin. There was almost nothing worth noting except for a book, and that book happened to be Kai's survival guide. Several pages of it had been deliberately torn out. Roland suspected that Lena did it. Zach was full of doubts about this. Then Roland told the story of how he followed Lena here, and found the body. After hearing this, Zach somewhat agreed with his statement. Later, they found that Lena had stopped at a slaughterhouse in Poland for a while. The two immediately drove there. From this, they learned that Lena had bought a large bucket of blood. Combined with Philip's death condition earlier, Roland suspected that Lena was actually a blood-sucking monster. Zach thought for a moment after hearing this. Then he took Roland to his secret base. It was an abandoned factory and also Zach's secret office. The walls were covered with various photos and newspapers from different eras. Zach claimed that he was investigating similar missing cases around the world. According to current data, the mountain of corpses wasn't the first time it had appeared. In 2013, dozens of bodies were found in a cave in Siberia. According to local people, it was left by a kind of monster that fed on human blood. It was probably the legendary vampire. Later, in Zach's in-depth investigation, it was found that similar incidents of mountains of corpses had occurred in various European countries since the last century, and there were the same rumors near the discovery sites. Zach also noticed that these crime scenes were mostly located in remote areas. One of the cases mentioned that those serial murderers had physical fitness far beyond that of ordinary people. From this, Zach inferred that these cases were all created by a certain cult organization, because he found a barb mark on a tree near Arthur's house, and this mark had appeared many times at other crime scenes. Zach believed that these people should belong to the same organization. Finally, Zach talked about how he disassembled Kai's name from the mysterious symbol. Therefore, Zach believed that Lena wasn't a vampire. Her younger brother Kai was. Kai had been secretly killing people since he faked his death many years ago. The deceased in that cabin earlier was killed by Kai, and Lena went to buy blood for her younger brother Kai. Of course, all the above were Zach's inferences, and there was no direct evidence to prove them. After listening to Zach's story, Roland recalled the two anglers arrested earlier. The cabin where they stayed happened to have a view of the mountain of corpses. If what Zach said was true, then the two must have seen Kai. So with Zach's help, Roland interrogated the two anglers again. From this, they learned the two did occasionally see a young man in dirty clothes driving to that remote corner at night, but because it was too dark, they couldn't see the specific details clearly. They could only vaguely see that the man seemed to be unloading something heavy from the car. Hearing this, Roland knew that Zach's guess was indeed correct. At the same time, when Zach was looking at the photos of the previous missing cases in his office, he accidentally saw a familiar book in one of the photos. It was exactly the one he and Roland found in the cabin, and it seemed that Arthur's house also had one. Early the next morning, Zach came to Lena's house and asked to borrow that book to check. Zach's arrival made the two elderly people look serious. They were worried that the secret would be exposed, but still held a glimmer of hope. In the end, they still lent the book to him. On the other side, Lena took her brother to Romania to inquire about their father's generation. Under the pretext of looking for their family ancestors, it took a lot of effort to find an old man who knew what happened back then. But although the other person knew that many people left here back then, he didn't know their names. After seeing the photo provided by Lena, the old man clearly recognized the person in it, but for some reason, he kept silent. The old man's strange attitude once frustrated Lena's investigation, but an old man suddenly visited them that night. He secretly invited the siblings. Led by the old man, the group came to a small tavern, and saw the old man from the day again. He didn't say much, but took the two to a room upstairs in the tavern, asked them to go in one by one. Lena was the first to enter the room, and found another old woman inside. The other person asked Lena why she was looking for those two people. She had to admit that one of them was her father. Upon hearing this answer, the old woman suddenly became excited for some reason. Then she asked Lena to stretch out her palm. The old woman only smelled it briefly, and confirmed that Lena knew nothing about her father. Then the old woman didn't say anything more, just told her not to continue investigating. Then her younger brother Kai entered the room. The old woman also smelled him, seemingly recognizing his identity. The old woman told Kai in a trembling voice, After learning this, Lena looked confused and couldn't understand why the old woman had said that, but the other person was unwilling to continue answering. After they two left, they didn't leave Nigeria but went to the library instead. All newspapers from the past few decades are kept here. Perhaps they could find traces of their father in the information from that time. During this period, Lena saw in the news that a case had occurred nearby. A green truck among them was very suspicious. Lena recognized that she had seen the truck at Annie's school before. Lena seemed to think of something, and entrusted the task of searching for newspapers to the librarian. She and her brother left in a hurry. At this time, Annie, who was locked in the dungeon at school, was very anxious, worried that she would disappear like her roommate. Just then, the principal suddenly appeared. With his help, Annie was able to leave the dungeon. Later, the principal sincerely apologized to her, saying that the previous incident was the personal behavior of a temporary worker who had now been fired. Not long after leaving the principal, Annie happened to meet Lena, who had come to investigate. Thinking of these strange things that had happened recently, Annie decided to tell Lena everything she knew. Thus, Lena and others learned about the strange situation in the school. In particular, the three-fingered killer was also related to this school. At the end of the conversation, Annie revealed that Adger had also been a student here, and was called a vampire by everyone. This made Lena sure that there was indeed something wrong with the school. She found the principal, planning to use the green truck as an excuse to find out more information, but was told that the driver had asked for leave not long ago, and driven the truck away from the school. Lena didn't get any useful information from the principal, so she returned to Germany to find the school tyrant, who had bullied her brother, having been driven away by him last time. This time she brought Roland along. Under the questioning of Lena and Roland, the school tyrant finally revealed why he feared Lena. According to the school tyrant, in fact, after Kai was pushed into the barbed wire, he lost his ability to fight, but at this time, Lena chased over. Due to an accident, a drop of blood slid into her mouth. The next second, Lena seemed to have completely changed. She smashed half of the school tyrant's face with one punch. Lena was shocked, as this was obviously a characteristic of a vampire, but previously, Lena had learned that this gene was only passed on in males. Lena returned home with a heavy heart. Her eyes fell on the wine jug, left by her mother on the table. Suddenly, a terrifying thought popped into her mind. At this point, her mother's figure appeared in front of her. Lena silently unscrewed the lid, and the liquid poured out was actually bright red blood. It turned out that Lena's mother was a rare female member of the Blood Clan. To protect this secret, her father Arthur broke with his companions. Now Lena had inherited her mother's genes, and had also become a rare female member of the Blood Clan. Just then, Arthur walked in. Seeing that the matter had been exposed, he couldn't help but sigh. Arthur had originally hoped that his daughter could live as an ordinary person all her life under his cover, but she still found out the truth. At the same time, Roland sent all the photos of the letters that Annie had sent him to Polish detective Zach. The other person immediately recognized that a necklace in one of the photos was similar to the one found in the mountain of corpses. After comparison, it was confirmed to be the same necklace. They immediately determined that Ader's brother Adger was a major suspect. Special police quickly raided Adger's residence, and found an underground hatch under the carpet in his room. But before the special police could open it, an accident suddenly happened. It was obvious that Adger had long been prepared for this. The police attached great importance to this matter. On one hand, they sent police to search for Adger. On the other hand, they arranged for people to go to the school to rescue the controlled students. But somehow the news leaked out. The school immediately gathered all the students and ordered them to drink milk. Only Annie noticed something was wrong and quietly poured out the milk. Thus, she was the only one who survived. Annie took the opportunity to escape to the school basement to hide, and found that there were many cells there. One of the men promised to ensure Annie's safety if she helped him escape. Without thinking much, Annie took out a bag of blood from the refrigerator. According to his instructions, she poured it under the door crack, and after the man drank the blood, he erupted with great strength. He kicked open the metal cell door in just a few blows, but Annie was shocked when she got a clear look at him, because the man was the three-fingered man in black. The other person didn't keep his promise to protect Annie's safety, but locked her in the cell. Then he fled the school alone. Luckily, not long after, the special police arrived at the school. Although almost everyone in the school, including the teachers, was dead, but Annie, who was locked in the basement, survived by luck. Based on the current evidence, the police suspect that Ader's brother Adger was the real principal. That is, the boss in Annie's words. The police questioned Ader about this, and he seemed completely unaware, saying that his brother was just a cleaner at the school. Just then, Ader's phone suddenly rang, and it turned out to be Adger calling. He asked his brother to send some money to the quarry on the outskirts. The police immediately went to ambush at the suburban vegetable market, but they waited at the quarry for a long time. but never found any suspicious people appearing. Only Lena realized that something was wrong. Obviously, this was a diversionary tactic. Not long after, she and Kai received a message from the Romanian librarian. At the same time, the other person found an old news story about a deserter, and the photo on it was, what's worse, Kai was now a guest at Ader's house. After receiving the news, Kai was obviously restless. Naturally, Ader noticed his abnormality. The other person guessed that Kai might have known his true identity, so he stopped pretending. He dropped the food in his hand, poured half a glass of blood, and drank it all in one go. Then Ader immediately stood up from the wheelchair. Shortly after, the mysterious three-fingered man in black also came to his house. It turned out that Ader was the father of the three-fingered man. It was Ader's brother Ager, who had imprisoned him in the school basement. Kai knew so much information, so Ader naturally wouldn't let him leave easily. When Lena hurried over, the house was already empty. After a search, she found a hidden basement in the backyard. Inside was a narrow and long passage. Lena walked over cautiously to check, and at the end of the passage was the mansion of the wealthy old Jason. Then she saw Ader leaving. Just as Lena was about to chase after him, she was attacked from behind by the three-fingered man in black. When she woke up again, she and her brother had been taken to. At this time, Lena noticed that Ager was also tied up not far away. It turned out that Ager wasn't Ader's brother. In fact, Ager was just one of the first batch of students in the school, and discovered Ader's true identity. But Ader didn't kill Ager, but kept him around as a mobile blood bag. But Lena borrowed him, causing Ager to break free from control. The three-fingered man in black, who was Ader's imprisoned son, obviously had the intention to rebel. As they were talking, Ader suddenly broke Ager's neck. After dealing with the traitor, Ader prepared to attack Lena. According to the plan, after getting rid of Lena, Ader would take Kai away and train him to be an excellent human hunter. But at this point, Roland actually caught up as well. Although he couldn't open the hidden door, he judged from the direction that the passage led to Jason's mansion. That's how he caught up. Lena only had time to say that Ader was the real mastermind. Then Roland was attacked by the three-fingered man in black. Seeing this, Ader guessed that the police would arrive soon, so he didn't say any more, knocked Kai unconscious on the spot and took him away. Then he stabbed Lena with a dagger, and left her to fend for herself. But what Ader didn't expect was that Roland didn't die immediately. Instead, he used his last strength to pull down the chair that bound Lena, letting her use his blood to awaken her true power. Then Roland took his last breath. Lena drank the blood with tears, and the hidden power in her body erupted completely. She quickly caught up with the three-fingered man and the others. Seeing blood at the corner of Lena's mouth, the three-fingered man immediately realized that Lena was a rare female member of the blood clan. Seeing his son die a tragic death in front of him, Ader went completely crazy, but he was no match for Lena at all. He was shot dead by Lena in a moment. Then Lena rescued her brother, who was imprisoned in a wooden box, and drove away quickly. Lena's identity as a female member of the blood clan was finally exposed, because Ader still had lackeys who saw everything and spread the news. The film ends here. The German drama Oderbruch was released in January 2024. The film inherits the consistent serious style of German dramas, so its audience is relatively small. Although the plot is relatively logical, the whole process is really too slow. Overall, it's a moderate vampire film. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.